So these youngsters have decided to join us. When did you come to town, madame?
1961.
And what brought you?
Marriage to Clarence,
And you guys met where?
the University of New Hampshire.
It must have been something coming from Wellesley to Brookline. What was that like?
A little bit of a culture shock.
What do you mean?
Well, it's a very small town, and of course, Wellesley was not a very small town.
Yeah.
But Wellesley was a college town, of course, but I enjoyed the people here.
That's a big jump.
Yeah.
How were you received?
Oh, very well.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I married into the Farwell family.
You for money.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Oh, lucky you. Where did you guys live when you came to town?
On the lake.
We built-
On the lake,
Okay,
right in back of the cemetery.
okay.
One year we stayed in Candia while she finished and got her degree at UNH.
Yeah, we got married between my junior and senior year.
Okay. What was your job? Wait a minute, so you were in school too? When you
I graduated the year before.
Okay, and what work were you doing?
I worked for Palazzi General Contractor for a year, and I worked for the state of New Hampshire for a year.
Doing what?
Construction, building the Manchester bypass.
No kidding, okay, so when did you become self-employed in town?
62,
And it's always been named what?
construction. Hey, you, I need something done.
Fair enough.
Farwell Construction.
Did you two ever work together?
Oh, he was in our youth group.
Do you remember him when he was a kid?
Oh, I sure do.
Can you
sure
share
do.
something interesting with us?
Well, we could share tons of stuff. We did youth fellowship things together, baseball things together. This guy was it was all part of the loose atmosphere for the kids growing up to get to know each other and do things they wanted to do together. I knew him well. I was older than both of them, so they knew my kids, my children better than they knew me.
I wanted to plug a hole, and I'm going to go back, forgive me on this. Your first ancestor in this town was who?
My grandmother, Florence Hobart Perrin, my mother's mother, was born in the house where I lived. She was the youngest of, 7 children. And my grandfather and her father built that house. So that was my connection to Brookline.
Okay, I'm sorry, her father or grandfather built the house?
Her father built the house.
What was his name?
George
Parent.
Hobart. George Hobart.
George Hobart.
I didn't know.
And there were a lot of Hobarts. There were 4 girls and 3 boys
Okay.
in that family. And George had a lot of brothers and sisters in Brookline. They're real old timers.
When did you first come to Brookline? You probably told us, what's the year?
1948. I really am sensitive to the fact that I should be letting these folks do the talking, because I have had one interview and I'm going to have another one. But I love it when I can
Sure.
react to the things that they say, because they stimulate my memories, and I maybe stimulate some of theirs too. I know I stimulate some of his. Maybe not all good ones.
Well, please jump in, okay?
Yeah,
Because
but
I've got-
I'll hang back
Okay.
for my turn later.
So Clarence, your first family member in this town was your grandfather?
Great-grandfather,
And what was his name?
James Franklin.
And where did he live in town?
I don't, he lived up, as far as I know, the stone house up North Brookline. The Conservation Commission owns it now. It was just a cellar hole, that's all.
Oh, okay. And his children were whom?
father was the only one out of 10 that survived.
And your father was Grover.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I'm eager to get both of your stories from when you came to town, but I'm wondering if you have the ability to reach back another generation. Were there stories that your dad used to tell and you remember them? So I don't want to lose those that you found interesting or he found interesting.
He was in the fire department when the townhouse burned. It was in January and snow was on the ground. I don't know whether it was snowing or not, but no, he didn't respond to the fire call, because back then for a fire call, all I did was ring the bell.
You mean when the meeting house burned?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did he say anything about the fire or he didn't go?
He didn't go.
He didn't go. Okay, well, Clarence, what about, I mean, he was very involved in town activities.
Yes.
And so he probably had some insight into how things worked around town.
Yes, he did.
Okay, what was it like? Did you get a sense of what the
Well,
town?
when I was a kid, there was what, 400 or 500 people in the town, the whole town? So it wasn't crowded, let's put it that way.
Did everybody get along like best of friends or?
No,
This has always been a feisty little town.
When have you ever seen
We
any
thrive on
Agreed.
differences in opinion.
I can remember town meetings. Clarence's grandfather and Llewellyn Powers,
Well, it was
back
my
and
grandmother's
forth, back and
father.
forth. You know, I don't care which one agreed on an article, the other one disagreed. And if he agreed, this one disagreed, you know? And there was some real good town meetings in those days, you know? Would have been something really to record, you know? Because sometimes it even got to the point where they would swear at each other, you know? And not only those, but there was others involved also, not just those two. But those two really stand out in my mind because, of course, I was a young fellow then, and the meetings were in the town hall, and with the kids, we always were up in the balcony at the town hall and listening to what was going on. And you can remember it was really spirited, you know.
It's a good term.
It was worth going to, you know.
It was.
But there probably wasn't only maybe 6 or 8 articles in the whole warrant, you know. So it was really a spirited affair, town meeting, and everyone went in those days. You know.
it was, lunch was served at noontime in the banquet hall.
Yes.
The-
And so it was a daytime meeting?
Yes. I think it was 9 o'clock.
What sort of things did people usually fight about? I assume it was money.
Most of the schools.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the roads, you know, money for the roads, or so much for the fire department, or it didn't seem to make much difference. There always was an argument going on somewhere, or one or the other of the articles, you know, that might have been to,
The same as it would be today.
yeah, it's the same as it would be today. You know.
Only it was
Except
between
that
2
I
people
give
instead of
$50.
6 people lined up at the mic.
I got to hear you.
They'd argue over $50.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that was a lot of money then.
Yeah, what the town meeting was, probably didn't raise over $5,000 at the most,
For
maybe.
both.
Yeah, I can remember right after the war, my boss, Bill Betters, was the road agent then, and they plowed snow in the town of Brookline. They plowed the whole town of Brookline for $3,500 a year. They bid on it, and they bid $3,500. They got the plowing contract for the whole year for the town, $3,500. Of course, there wasn't only, 25 miles of road in Brookline at that time, you know. No divisions, no subdivisions, just the roads through center of town and the old roads that we have.
Didn't he plow with a bulldozer at one point?
Pardon?
Didn't he plow with a bulldozer at one point?
Well, sometimes with the storms, we'd go out with a bulldozer. They had, when I first went to work for them, they had a small bulldozer that we plowed roads with it. And there was places in town where it would drift that you couldn't get through with the truck. And they would go out with the bulldozer. And then later years, as their construction business grew, they also had bigger bulldozers. And we also, at times, hired one of the state highway trucks with wings on it so that they could push the roads back further. Most of the time, we were able to take care of it with 2 or 3. I plowed one side of town, Frank Farrell plowed the other side of town. And that was the way it worked at that time. He plowed on that side of the town and I plowed on this side. Route 13, the new Route 13 was just going through after the war. And I don't know, we just seemed to work out all right. If something happened, we went out with a bulldozer or a payloader or something and opened up the roads at that time. There wasn't any traffic. You know, after 8 o'clock at night, there was nobody on the roads, so you'd keep things open during the day, and at night you would go out and push the roads back, you know, and parking lots.
And if you broke an axle, you walked home.
Yeah.
Did that
Broke an
happen?
axle, you
On
walked
New
home.
Year's Eve,
Oh, no.
New Year's
right
Eve,
by the party. Yeah.
right up in front of Kinney Farm.
Yeah. Who
Coming
lived
around
there?
the corner.
Who lived there then?
Got off too far on the edge of the road. There we were. She was with me.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
To ride with me. We didn't have any helpers. No. And she was to ride with me at night. We were coming home. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30, probably.
New Year's Eve.
10, yeah, New Year's Eve, probably 10 degrees, 10 below maybe, I don't remember. But I can remember we got home. And just about as we got home, there had been a big party going on up at Martha Hurley's house up on Old Milford Road. Just about the time we got home, after walking all the way from the Kinney Farm, people started coming home with their cars. We walked, we didn't get a ride.
Going home from the party.
It was too late,
did it
we
too
were already home.
Go.
I want to ask these two. You remember when Bill Betters married May Betters, the New York gal? She was a very striking looking, very sophisticated woman that he met and married and brought her back to Brookline.
That's another one.
You remember May?
I do not.
Do you remember May?
I remember May.
I bet you
I
do.
remember May.
I bet you remember May.
To hear that, enough
Well,
said.
and what,
Any
what,
comments? It
what's-
was a culture shock for her, and it was a culture shock for Brookline.
what do you mean exactly?
Well, I mean that she had no idea what she was getting into coming to a little town up in New Hampshire. And the little town in New Hampshire had no idea of what she came from and what she had done before she was here. So they just didn't understand each other at all. And it didn't work very well for either one of them.
Dell, do you have a little insight here, or you'd like to steer clear of this?
That's
Do you have a little insight into this? What Betty's
What do you got
referring
to say
to?
about May?
He
Anything?
maybe doesn't want to
I know,
share
I
it.
know, that's all right.
And that, but I just,
No, she was quite different. She didn't bother the workforce much, you know, she didn't bother with the workforce too much.
She didn't work there.
But she didn't bother with the work people who worked for us too much, that worked for the Bettis family. She didn't bother with them too much.
Yeah.
But she, as I remember, she got a acting group together. She put some plays on in the town hall, one thing, you know. I don't remember too much about her. She wasn't here too long.
She did, it was an impossible match. Really didn't work very well. But she was very interested in getting things to happen in the community. And she found it difficult that people were not ready to go along with some of her ideas. And there was a clash.
Well, let's see, I mean, the selectmen turn over every year, but who were the big shakers and movers in this town, 50 years ago or 70 years ago?
The Farwells and the Pheasants were the
And the
shakers.
Corys.
And the who?
Corys.
The Corys, yes. There were a lot of, and the Hobarts were movers and shakers in the town. Llewellyn Powers was married into the Hobart family and lived right across the street from us. And
How about memorable characters? Does anybody come to mind when you think about old Brookline?
Yes, Luther Malloy.
Tell us.
He had a horse that died, and he said that was funny. You never did that before.
I didn't hear that.
The horse died, and the owner said, well, that's funny, he's never done that before. Where did,
That's just a story I
That's a
heard.
great one.
I didn't get in on the action or anything.
Dale, come on.
Grandpa George Fowle, he was one of the characters in Brookline.
How so?
Oh, I don't know, he was just one of those fellows that was a character in town, He was one of those at town meeting that spoke up what his thoughts were. Sometimes they were all right, sometimes they weren't. But he was one of the characters at that time,
Had a beard, he used to shave it just for town meeting.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I can remember, Clarence's brother Grover telling me about his grandfather. He ate soup quite a lot. He had one soup bowl, and when he was done, he turned it upside down on the table until the next time he had soup. It didn't get washed out too often.
Wonderful.
He said every once in a while he had to have a new bowl because it got
What was
crowded enough inside. And that was told to me by your brother,
Well, it's true.
What was the name of the guy that delivered ice from the ice house? And he always came to the town meeting at a church supper because that's the only time he really got a good meal. And he would come in and sit down at the church supper and he would load up his plate and load up his plate. Do you remember who that was or his name?
Delivered ice.
No, I was just trying to ask you because we had ice when we were first married because there was no ice boxes and somebody delivered it.
Yeah, we must have.
He had an old truck that
Yeah.
was falling apart.
Yep.
And he had it fastened together with glue and adhesive tape. And he would go up Steam Mill Hill, not Steam Mill Hill, up the Mason Road, delivering ice. And when he stopped to make a delivery, the truck was on the hill. It was going to roll back down the hill because the brakes didn't work on the truck. So he'd take a block of ice out of the back of the truck and put it up behind the wheels, and then he'd go in and deliver the ice. And one time he went in and deliver the ice, and he stayed a couple hours, and the ice melted, and the truck went down the hill and crashed into the mud at the bottom of the hill. Well, he was a character.
I
Where'd he
can't
live?
remember who
You couldn't stand
delivered
to
ice.
sit next
I
to
can
him.
remember someone delivering ice, but I
They'd
can't
have to,
remember
come
who
to
it
think
was.
of it, because we.
One
had
time
ice
he
when
came
we were
into
there.
our yard. I maybe should save this story for later because it is one of my funny stories. And it's,
Go ahead, we want to hear it.
Well, he drove into our yard and it was mud season. And you know what mud season used to be like up our hill. Now everybody would get stuck for a month.
It was a dirt road, I take
In the
it.
middle of the marsh. You
was a dirt
know.
road. It was a
you
dirt
know.
road.
So he came into our yard and Sid could hear the wheels of his truck spinning in the mud outside he would back up and roar back and then roar forward and roar back and roar forward. Couldn't get the truck out of the mud. So Sid went out and he looked at the truck and the fender had slid down around the tire and was going under the tire, and he was rolling up onto the fender when he was spinning his wheels in the air. The mud was going all over creation, and Sid walked over and he picked up the fender and he tied the fender up so that it didn't go down underneath the wheel anymore. And then he backed out and went off. He never even said thank you to Sid. It was so comical. I never could.
You don't know where he lived.
Yeah.
He lived up in the boarding house across that burned down.
Canal
You
Street?
know which one? On
John Elliott.
Mason's.
Sounds like John Elliott.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Sounds like who?
I said, it sounds like John Elliott.
John Elliott. You got it.
Yeah, I can
He was
remember.
one of the ice cutters, and he worked for the ice company. And he was a bachelor, never married, lived up in the boarding house.
He owned the boarding house.
Adele, what are we talking about boarding house? Where is this?
It's gone
Tore it
now.
down. It was in front of Alvin Taylor.
It,
Oh, okay.
It was on the-
Tell
on
you
the
where it was.
Is it?
it was on the left.
Alvin Taylor's house.
On Canal Street.
No.
Near
Meeting
Canal.
House Hill, just in front of where Alvin
On
Taylor
the
used to
corner
live.
Yeah.
Of Canal,
It was actually on Meeting House.
the one that they were
Yes, and it
talking
burned
about
down.
last time at
Oh,
the
he tore it down.
Historical Society.
What?
The next street that
John
it burned
Elliott.
down, but the
Yeah.
boarding house was torn
No, I
down.
used to
Alvin
point
Taylor
out.
Oh,
bought
was
it.
it? Well,
Torn down.
I'm sure I don't remember it entirely accurately, but there were a lot of men who stayed at the boarding house during the winter when the ice was being cut and stored in the ice house. It was big times when they all were into town. And a few of them stayed year round and worked for the ice
Oh, John
company.
Elliott.
Well, wait a minute, what do you mean it was big times when they went into
Well,
town?
they were
Elliott's
drinking.
place
And
Years ago, the Greasy
there was an
Spoon.
awful lot of alcohol involved with the big times. And it was a whole different atmosphere when the crews arrived to cut the ice. There's a lot of stuff already been researched on the ice house. And I think there's a lot in the town report.
So
But
are you-
John Elliott was a real character.
Yeah.
And you
I
couldn't
don't
sit
know
next to him at a church supper
only
because
3 years
he
older
smelled so
than I
bad that everybody got up and had to move. But he came in and he sat down and he refilled his plate over and over again until the supper was over. He was a real character. And how about Jimmy Lawrence? You lived next to Jimmy Lawrence for a long time. Jimmy Lawrence had a pet raccoon,
Yeah.
and he wore it for this live pet raccoon for a raccoon collar in the wintertime to keep his neck warm.
Do you remember this guy, Doug?
What? You
Not-
remember him?
I think it was auction, that's all I know about it.
I can
And you know,
remember Jim
Aunt
Long.
Eepie was his sister, and the two of them lived 2 houses down from you. And
They lived
Three,
on the,
3 houses down
3 houses down, right? And
on the corner of Elm,
corner
they
of
were-
Elm Street.
They were
Mary
brother
Dulat's
and-
house now.
where Browns live now.
I remember we
It's funny,
had,
a lot of this,
used to have
she's
a
3 years
fish
older
dealer
than I
that
am,
came
and I
through
don't
Brookline.
remember these.
Ralph Dunkley from Milford.
She's just.
He used to come and
here's some
peddle
Things that she's reading.
fresh fish. He would go into Boston and get the fish and come and peddle it through Brookline out of a truck, you know. Because I can remember my father loved haddock. And he would say to Ralph, "Hey, Ralph, is that haddock fresh?" And he'd say, "It ought to be." He says, "I caught it out of Babusick Lake this morning." So, but, he used to peddle fish
Yeah.
once a week.
And what's that other fellow that used to come around selling clothes and things like that?
Oh, there was a fellow that came out of Fitchburg, a Jewish man, with a horse and a wagon, a closed-in wagon, and he used to travel from Fitchburg over here to Brookline, through towns, and I imagine selling in town also. But he used to sell clothes, and he used to stay overnight at my folks' house quite a lot because my father had the farm, and he would put up the horse overnight, and we had spare bedrooms in the house, and this fellow would stay. And I don't remember, I know he was Jewish, and my mother had to prepare something for him, but I don't remember what she used to prepare for him. It seems though he used to have a lot of eggs and milk, something like that, but he used to sell clothing to different, you know, a whole suit. He would take your measurements, and the next time he came, or a couple of times he came, he'd have a complete suit for you. Whether he, I don't think they manufactured it himself. I think that they bought it probably already made somewhere, out of Boston or somewhere.
Like your black pinstripe suit.
Oh yeah, I had a black pinstripe suit. I can remember when I was. Yeah.
I would love to see you in a pinstripe suit. You gotta wear.
Yeah, it was double-breasted too, I think, as I remember. Double-breasted.
I bet you look pretty darn smart.
And I probably had a felt hat and all the damn works.
Wow.
But his name was Sam. Sam Kabachinet. That Sam Kabachinet. And I can remember once somewhere in Massachusetts, between here and Fitchburg, he got robbed. Someone robbed him. Some held him up for the money. I don't know where it was now, but I remember he did get robbed one time. He's just another one of the travelers that came through Brookline. You had people that would come through selling Watkins products, Raleigh products, which were, they sold liniment, they sold cough syrup, they sold bunion pads, they sold
Spices.
they sold everything practically, you know, that you might need for household products.
Would they come to your house?
Oh yeah, door to door. Excuse me, door to door. Yeah.
Well, other than Mr.
You must remember some other things.
I remember the peddlers that came around selling, mother used to wait for him for vanilla extract.
Yeah.
Didn't find
Yeah.
it in the store, but he had it in his car.
Yeah.
The car would be full of liniments and extracts and so forth.
Full of brush man, too.
Full of rush.
Well, I remember
And they used to have a
having
baker that
one
came
room in
around.
our house that was called the corn chamber. where they shared the corn cobs and stuff. And the tramps that came through would stop and ask for food or lodging or something. And they put them up in the corn chamber. And that would turn out to be Mary's room later on, and when we were remodeling things. But I can remember times when there were tramps that they accommodated, gave them a place to sleep and a square meal, and they'd stay in the corn chamber.
Were people afraid of the tramps?
No, not a bit. That I remember.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if they made
I
a
can-
personal judgment about each one, whether it looked like that he was,
I can remember the tramps being put up in what was the town jail, in the basement of the town hall. There was
Oh.
2 or 3 cells downstairs, I think where the food pantry is now, in that area. There was 2 or 3 cells there, and they would put up the tramps there. Chief of police would lock them up at night, and they would, as she said, people in town would prepare a meal. I can remember my mother used to prepare meals for them, and they would come and eat, and then the chief would put them up overnight, and in the morning they would be gone. They would have breakfast and go somewhere else. They'd go to the towns, and they were on their way again. They were just tramps that lived from here to there.
Do you remember who the police chief was?
Yeah, Chester Barnaby most of the time that I remember.
What was he like?
Oh, he was a jolly fellow. Of course, chief of police and then was a part-time job.
I think he
It
got
wasn't-
$50?
Something like that.
$50 for being.
Something on that
a year.
idea, And,
well,
a
my,
lot a lot of times they would have a fellow in town that used to imbibe quite a lot. He'd show up at the dances in town, and Chet would take him down, lock him up. After the dance was all over, he'd go down and unlock him and say, "Okay, Arthur, go ahead home," and that would be it,
Doggy Austin?
Yeah,
Yeah, fellow.
and used to have dances, Zazal Ludwig Orchestra. And that's when I was going to school, in high school.
That's the way they raise money to buy the 39 fire truck,
The dances,
the dances.
okay.
Sometimes the Legion ran them, sometimes the fire department ran the dances.
Where were the dances? Town hall?
In the upstairs, in the
upstairs.
town hall.
And in the Legion Hall. I
Right.
remember dances in the
Really?
Legion Hall.
Friday night, you look forward to Friday night, because that was really the highlight of your whole week, was to go to the dance on Friday night for 50 cents.
my mother used to say that
All
the
the kids
thing she
used to
loved
go.
about Brookline was the dances. There were always dances at the town hall or the Legion Hall, and people
Wouldn't you go
from
to a
all
dance at
around
the
came
Legion?
to the
When I
dances.
first came to town, that's where they were. Yeah.
Not much room.
Was it just as,
Oh,
it was
but
just
there
as,
wasn't many of us.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Just a Saturday
Didn't
night.
Whitcomb Store used to do movies outside? Does anybody remember that? Or am I making that up?
no, Del
no.
tell you about that.
The, across the street from the store, where the dog grooming business is now, they had outdoor movies at night. Because at the same time, Whitcomb's in the store had an ice cream parlor, and that would kind of help sell ice cream or groceries, or, but they had movies across the street, and you'd go take your blanket, sit on the ground, bring whatever you wanted. If you wanted something to eat with you, you'd buy something at the store, soda, potato chips, or something on that idea, and sit and watch the movies. And usually they had someone had friends with the Whitcomb family that had like a country western orchestra. And they used to play before the movies. They would play, and then when it got dark, they would show the movies. That happened, I don't know how often. But it used to be one of the highlights in town, you know. People would go and sit there and watch the movies. Of course, they probably were all over by 9:30, 10 o'clock, so it wasn't a big affair. You know. It was a big affair to go then.
Ed?
Do you remember Uncle Lou and Aunt Celia and Jeffy going around playing at square dances? Uncle Lou would play the fiddle, and Celia would play the piano.
What's the last name?
Hobart.
Oh, okay.
And
Powers.
Actually, it was Powers.
Llewellyn Powers.
Right.
Does anybody remember the Elmwood Inn?
Yeah,
Outboard in.
Elmwood Inn on
I remember hearing about it, but I never.
Road Jean, you remember? Just that it existed?
no, it was a home when I came to town.
Okay.
No, we didn't, no, yeah, no, it wasn't either. They still took in boarders.
Oh, yeah, and it was a summer, you know, people came in the summertime a lot because they used to have the lake, used to take people up to the lake for swimming. And, ball games that used to go on in town
Where was the ball field?
at the ball field where the ball field is now.
Okay.
In fact, Clarence played up there probably, played baseball up there when he was a young fella.
Henry Watkins,
Yeah, yeah,
and Annie Quigley
yeah.
ran the
Yeah,
team.
I was gonna just ask if you remembered Annie Quigley.
Oh, of course.
Why, tell us.
She was the grandmother of our present police chief.
I remember her a little bit. She and Bill. Why, was she active in town?
Yes,
Annie,
yes.
What did she do?
She was the head of the Ladies' Aid, I'll have you know.
The what?
She was the most important woman in town. She,
The what?
Ladies' Aid.
Ladies' Aid.
That's the one I was
Yeah,
telling
the
you about
extension.
before, that supported
Okay.
the church
She
over
often
many
had their
years.
meetings at her house. We learned cake decorating, took cake decorating lessons down there and braided rugs and
Wow.
all kinds of good things. She was very crafty.
Very
lady.
talented.
So to
In a
speak.
good way.
Yeah.
She was really a very interesting person to me. She was very kind, and she loved to gossip. And the gossip was kind gossip. She always knew about everybody and everything in town, and she usually had a good word to say about them. And if somebody was sick, she'd take them a meal, and if somebody needed help on something, she was there, and she did wonderful handcrafted things. She made all kinds of things. And Bill, her father and mother-in-law, and her own father and mother, all four of them lived with Bill and Annie Quigley in their house down there on South Main Street. You remember that? You might not remember, but I can remember going in to see Annie about some Ladies' Aid business or something like that. And she served 4 meals. She had them in the hospital beds in the living room. 4 hospital beds, and she served them meals, and she took care of them until they died. She was a really remarkable lady, and very efficient. She could do anything, anytime.
Was she from Brookline?
I don't know where she was from.
Dell seems to know.
You do?
her maiden name was Annie McPhails.
Oh, I remember the
And
name.
her father worked at the ice house. She married Bill. Bill came to town. There was a at the Stone Fence Inn, which Regine talked about, they ran a dude ranch. And the field beyond there, beyond the house, they had some tents set up, and they had horses up there. And Bill Quigley came from Massachusetts somewhere to work as a wrangler, or as I remember, he took care of the horses, and they had rides all through town, up and around the lake and through the woods in town. They had guests come for a period of time, whatever they wanted, you know. And somehow Annie McPhails and Bill Quigley got together, and they married. And as Betty said, they lived in the McPhail house on South Main Street, on the left, just before you get to Oak Hill Road.
She was
And
amazing.
they got together, and eventually Bill became police chief in Brookline after the Dude Ranch was over. He became police chief. He also was a plumber. He worked for a company in Milford.
Wilton,
Pardon?
didn't he work in Wilton?
Yeah.
Who did he work for?
He worked for a plumbing outfit in Milford.
Oh, I think I
Martin,
remember
I think the
that
name of it
too.
was. And he worked for them. Regine rode back and forth with him to work when you were working Textron?
Okay, too.
OK Tool Company, anyway. And he became police chief. Annie and Bill had 3 children,
I think so.
2 girls
I think
and a
so.
boy.
I think so.
And that,
The rest of the story is for Bill to tell.
Sounds interesting.
story, what?
Is for Bill to tell.
Oh, okay.
They must be interviewing Bill Quigley between Bill the second and Bill the third.
Yeah,
Amazing, because the second one became police chief in Nashville.
Yes.
yeah.
And Bill-
Now
Bill
his
Quigley-
son is chief in Brookline.
Bill Quigley Senior really loved a parade.
That was,
He loved a parade, and he would strut down the main street and leading the parade. And he had so much pride in it. He was just so proud of the town and everything. You remember how he was?
I remember.
You remember him, of course.
Was he a hard man or a soft cop who'd take people home rather than arrest them?
He was mostly very friendly and helpful and wanted to do the right thing, don't you think?
He certainly tried.
Yeah. He had, I hesitate to say something that isn't really nice about him because I really liked him, but he wasn't very smart. And he got fooled a lot by,
Was it hard being a police chief in this town back then, or is it an
yes,
easy
it
job?
was.
Why was it hard?
Always hard.
Why?
But it's always hard for a police chief. If you arrest somebody's kid, that kid person is not your friend forever again. It's a really tough thing to do. And Bill Senior really tried hard, but there were a lot of times that he got into a lot of difficulties, and he didn't arrest the right person, or he did things that some people in the community didn't think were so good. But
Yeah, Bill has-
he had a lot of pride in it, and it was the most important thing in his life to be the chief of police. He thought that was the ultimate goal
For him.
for him.
That's nice. Dell.
And
well,
it-
the town was changing at that time. You know, that was after the war. It was after the war. The town was starting to change.
How so?
Well, I mean, it was starting to grow, and people had different ideas than they did, way back before the war. The war had changed a lot of things, and people had different ideas, and more mobile people were moving in, and they had new ideas. People were moving out, and old people passed on, and things were changing, and it was a hard time for a while, too.
The chief would have to use his own car for patrolling. He kept asking the town for a cruiser, and they'd vote it down each time.
Some of the old timers in town didn't really like the new ideas, some of them, and it was a struggle.
of them,
It was a struggle for a while, to get the town orderly.
So let me push on that. What was the value difference you're talking about? It went from what kind of people to what kind of people?
No, well, it came from people that were old settlers here, that have lived here all their lives, or most of their lives, and some new people were moving in with new ideas, wanted to change the town, they moved from somewhere else, and they brought their ideas with them, and they wanted to change the whole setup, which no longer just lived a simple life, where 8 o'clock at night the town was all done, the sidewalks were rolled up, what sidewalks they were, and you went to bed, that was it, and the next day you started a new day, and maybe somebody else moved into town that next day, and they had new ideas, and the people in town started to have ideas of their own, that there was new things coming along. Electronic age started with new radio, new television. I can remember when we lived in the little house back at the Mahakian school there, our first television. I can remember our first television we had in there. Cabinet model, a little screen about this big, and
Black and white,
pardon?
black and white.
Black and white. And I can remember people coming in to watch our television. The Austins came in from down the street, and a couple of Cunninghams, they came in to watch our television, because we had probably one of the first televisions in Brookline, and it was a big event, that.
The Depression hit this town very hard.
Is that right?
The Great Depression back in the 30s. And my grandmother was the only employer in the whole town.
What was her?
Everything else, she had the Parent Gift Company, and she sold religious gifts. And many of them were made on our dining room table. And she sold baptismal certificates and stuff like that. And she had an agent and she sold all over the country. And she had a business in Boston. And she traveled back and forth between Boston and Brookline. Brookline in Massachusetts and Brookline, New Hampshire. So she, we shouldn't forget Charlotte Wright, should we, in our...
Tell us about Charlotte.
Charlotte was the longtime librarian. And Charlotte lived up on the other side of us, right up on our top of Steam Mill Hill there where we all lived. And Charlotte and Dick Wright. And see, what can we tell them about Charlotte and Dick? Dick was an invalid, and he did not go out. He could barely walk. And he was very embarrassed about his condition, and he didn't go anywhere. They didn't have a car, and Charlotte walked everywhere in town that she went. And she babysat from all of my children, 25 cents an hour. I would put a towel in the window of my house, and she could see the towel, and she would know that I needed her to come down and help me with the children, and she would come immediately down. She always went to the mail every day, and she picked up our mail and brought it out, doled it out to us. She worked a lot for my grandmother and did a lot of things. But she was really a very remarkable librarian because she delivered the books to everybody in town. She'd say, I think you're going to like this book, so she'd take the book and take it to them. And she'd walk, and then she'd walk back and pick it up when it was time for it to go back to the library.
Is this the type of person we lost? Has Brookline changed? Or is
It's a whole different story. To think about Annie Quigley, you think about Charlotte, you think about John Elliott delivering the ice and all that sort of thing. It is a different world.
Well, let's see, while you're on that list, any other noteworthy characters, you guys, that we don't want to lose to history?
You can think of a whole bunch.
Come on, Clarence.
No, you can't.
Talk to us.
Some of them
Come
were
on,
not
Clarence,
very
it's your
savory,
turn.
and some of them were savory, weren't they?
Well, Clarence-
Wonderful people.
Clarence is from a different era, a different generation, you know?
True.
From what I remember about town. So, you know, when you were growing up, you must remember things that went on in town, you know, like from your generation, what was going on. We've been telling everything that was in our generation, so.
Well, schools certainly changed from part of it in Daniels Academy, Milford Street, and then we went to the new school, quote unquote, on Milford Street. And now we have 3 additions onto that, plus Captain Samuel Douglas School.
When you were going to school, was there still the 2 schools in Brookline, the primary school and the grammar school?
Changed the first year I went to Nashville. It was in I graduated in 54. So in 48, we changed from going to Milford. You probably did.
Yeah.
And that's just when I moved to Brooklyn.
Milford,
To Nashville, right?
from Milford, they stopped going to Milford when,
Well,
48, 58?
They had a choice. The students could either finish the year in Milford or they could go to Nashville and graduate. They split.
Do we run buses to both?
No, we just run the buses to Nashville.
So you had to get yourself to Milford if you wanted to finish Milford.
That's the way it was all during the 30s.
And Corey ran the school bus to Nashville?
Lawrence Corey, yes.
Was he the first one?
Yep.
Yeah.
He did it for, I don't know how many years. He did it for years.
And as I remember, he bought a new bus, a regular bus
Yeah.
to use for
It's a
transportation.
real.
And he had the garage there on Bond Street.
Right, the house that Sullivan's lived in, I think they're still there. He used that as a garage for his bus.
So,
But we went from rubbish collection to the dump that we call it now. The old days, they used to lug it out back of everybody's house and have a pit or whatever to get rid of the trash.
You had a big barrel, burned your rubbish,
Yep.
your own household rubbish.
When Clarence got out of college, he was working for Palazzi's, he said, in the state of New Hampshire. And then he got the septic system for the elementary school, a new school on Milford Street. And he said, if I get that, I'm gonna go into business for myself.
No.
And he got that job, and he went into business for himself.
The rest is history. That's wonderful.
Right.
So how long is that, Clarence?
Too long.
1962?
Do you remember when they first started the Brookline dump?
Yes.
I mean,
Brookline
before
was-
that, people just got rid of their rubbish everywhere. I can
Dump.
Yeah,
go out on
that was
the
Alton Jensen.
Woods Road and
He was moderator in town.
the,
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh,
you
Long
could
time
find a
ago.
dump here and a dump there, you
There's
know.
a Tucker's Pit, the gravel pit down where Joe Joki is. There was all kinds of trash out there. There was piles and piles.
I can
When I
remember.
was a little girl and I came up to visit my grandmother, my job was to take the garbage from the house up on the hill. And my grandmother would say, just don't leave it in one place. Make sure you
Oh, no.
scatter it all around.
Wonderful.
And the animals took care of it. And I thought that was the most wonderful thing in the whole wide world, to be charged with taking that garbage up on the hill and scattering it. I could picture all the animals coming in, getting in, and here I was feeding all the animals. I just thought that was wonderful. And most of the people did do that with their garbage. And then they also, my family, dug dry holes, and they put the glass bottles and all of that kind of stuff in the hole, and fill up the hole, and then they cover it up and make another one. So we used to, when we were kids, and even my children when they were kids, would go up and find those dry holes and open them up, and there were all these valuable bottles in there. They were worth big money, some of them as much as $100 you could get for the bottles, but that's where the trash went. And there were 5 dry holes dug on your family's farm land out back of the house, of our house. We were on your land.
Yep.
And we dug the dry holes for the septic stuff to run off onto your land.
No,
You didn't think anything about it. It was a perfectly natural thing to do.
Yeah.
It had been done by my grandparents years. The original Hobarts started the deal with your Porter family. And that's where all our septic went, until we finally built a septic system for ourselves. I'll tell you another really funny.
I think Dale has a comment.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I was a young fellow, we didn't have a septic system. We had a 3-holer.
Yeah.
You know, even after we were married, when we lived up over my folks' house. Truck down the stairs, through the house, out through the shed, out to the outhouse, way out on the end of the shed, you know. And that went in the spring, it was cleaned out and went out of either the land or went into the garden. Probably used to raise the best cucumbers you ever saw, you know. But, it was just one of those things that happened in those days. There was not
we had the same thing
real
in our
septic systems and bathrooms in town, you know.
That was one of my culture shocks when I
Old stuff.
came to
Really?
Brookline, yeah. Clarence told me that his brothers put in this bathroom in his parents' house. I used to come down and visit him in Brookline. But I did have an inside bathroom, but they had just put it in.
Wow, what happened?
Well, my grandmother put in a water closet at the end of this alleyway where the three-holer was. And during the summer, instead of using the three-holer, we would use the water closet. It would freeze in the winter, so you couldn't do it. It was a big old
Tank.
thing that up at ceiling height at the end, and then there was a regular toilet down below, and you pulled a chain and down came all the water. Well, if you don't think us kids had fun with that, that was just the biggest deal, was to go out and use the water closet and flush that water down the drain.
That was your flush toilet in those days.
That's right.
Pump the water into that tank up in the air. And when you were finished, you pulled the chain. That flushed the toilet. That's why it was called a water closet in those days, you know. But
How about characters in your time? I mean, you came in fresh, and you had to figure out all these personalities, Marcia. And, anybody come to mind that you're willing to
Well,
think
Jimmy
of?
Austin, of course.
Yeah, well, I would like to get to Jimmy Austin. Tell us about Jimmy Austin.
He was probably the biggest character I came up against when I got to town, but I'm sure there were a lot of older ones too.
Well,
Tell
I'm
me
sure.
the name again, please.
Jimmy Austin.
Oh, yes,
So,
oh, yes.
why was Jimmy Austin interesting?
Well, he didn't care about what anybody thought about anything. Jimmy Austin was just Jimmy Austin. Did what he wanted, said what he wanted, talked the way he wanted, drank the way he wanted. He was quite a character.
And he was really pleased when he got a bill that was stamped final notice.
Okay.
say there, that's it. Won't be getting any more of those, and he'd throw it in the rubbish can. So that was it. That was final.
Did he marry?
He always had a car which the fenders were hanging off of. In the back seat was his chainsaw, because that's what he did. He would cut wood, and he'd cut lumber, and chainsaws in the back of his car, and gasoline cans.
I think it's got time for us to leave.
He
Must be time.
he was not in any way an alcoholic. He just liked it.
Hi, Edith. Thanks for joining us.
I haven't joined you yet.
Have a seat. We were just talking about you.
I might run out
Well.
before I sit.
Are you afraid of
think
this
I'm
group of
gonna
people?
Can we get you anybody something to drink? There's lemonade, there are cookies.
Coffee.
If any,
Can I get you coffee?
I haven't got
Would you like a coffee?
lemonade.
We're gonna leave?
you guys,
Yeah, there's enough others to
it's been a while.
to
Thank
talk
you.
with.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.